Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson and welcome back to the Pokémon Film Perspectives. And today we're going to be discussing the 13th animated film to be released as part of the Pokémon franchise, Zoroark, Master of Illusions. Two things. Firstly, I apologize in advance if I'm mispronouncing Zoroark. For the most part, that sounds like what it's supposed to be in the movie, but if that's not how it's supposed to be pronounced, I apologize, because I think I did hear it pronounced slightly differently in the film, but so, again, apologies if I'm mispronouncing it. Secondly, once again, using my phone as a light, so if you hear an occasional bzzz, it's because my phone's getting a notification and it's on silent. Anyway, with that out of the way, what's my history with this movie? Well, like I said last week, there is none. This is the first of the Pokemon films that I really don't have any history with when I was growing up. Mostly because after Arceus and the Jewel of Life, my exposure to Pokemon was becoming less and less. So I wasn't really keeping up with what was the next Pokemon movie that was going to be coming out. As such, while I do kind of have a slight faint memory of this movie being on TV, it's very faint at best and could easily have just been something I imagined. Regardless, I don't remember watching this film when I was a kid, and I don't remember keeping up with it at all. So, just something that kind of goes over my head. I might have seen a DVD of it on a shelf somewhere, but again, don't take my word for it. But ultimately, I did see this movie, well, when I started collecting the Pokemon films. Specifically, the first time I ever saw it was on this, in the Pokemon Diamond and Pearl film collection. As such, that was when I actually did get that DVD collection, I was finally able to get the chance to watch the film. And I thought it was pretty good. For a film that I didn't watch when I was growing up, I was actually surprised at how much I liked the film. But does it still hold up? Well, let's take a look at it and find out. So, of course, let's get to our long-ass plot summary. And the film actually opens with Ash and Co. as we see them at a Pokemon Center as they're watching a ball game. Specifically, a ball game for a new sport called Soccer. Yeah, it's like soccer, but with a B instead of an S, but whatever. Basically, despite the similar-sounding name, Soccer is not like soccer. It's still a ball game where we have two separate teams trying to compete to get a ball into a net, but the thing is, this ball looks like I forgot what it was, a rotating Pokemon. It looks like a top or whatever, and basically how each team works is that they're made up of 3 Pokemon, each of the same type, and there's a trainer, of course, guiding them and trying to direct them. And as such, the 2 teams of Pokemon compete over the ball, and whichever one gets the ball into this electric Faraday cage net the most times ends up winning the round. And of course, we see Ash and Co. watching one of these battles and of course getting into it. Of course, the battle eventually ends, I think, with the electric type Pokemon winning, and as a result, Ash and Co. kind of are happy. But the thing is, part of the reason why they're watching it like this is because they're actually going to be going to a city called Crown City, where a Soccer Ball tournament is going to be taking place, and basically what they're watching on TV is just basically not really the semifinals, but pre-qualifying matches. But of course, all eyes are on the Soccer tournament because there is one team that's getting everyone's attention. A team belonging to a man named Kodai. And the reason why it's getting everyone's attention is not just because of this team's skill, but because apparently Kodai has on this team 3 legendary Pokemon: Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. Don't know how he would get them, but hey, he's got them! He's sweeping through the nation, and everyone thinks that his chances of winning the Soccer Ball tournament are very much in his favor. Yeah, he's the bad guy. Yeah, I'm just gonna blow the lid on that right now. He's the bad guy, and because I don't really want to get into it as I go through the vlog, I'm actually just going to reveal his entire story right now, because it is revealed piecemeal through the movie, but I just want to get into it. So, Kodai's a piece of shit, in every sense of the word. Basically, Kodai has the power to see the future, and that's part of the reason why he's such a successful businessman, because as we learn later in the movie, he has basically every business enterprise that he's ever gone into, he has risen to the top of, to the point where he is the head of his own media empire. The guy is on top of the world, but there are rumors that spread out that he basically is a ruthless man that will do anything to get what he wants, and regardless of who he has to hurt to get it. However, the thing is, the reason why he's been able to do all this is because, as I just said, he has the power to see into the future. But how he got this power was through something a bit underhanded. You see, originally Kodai was just an average, ordinary guy, but he learned about how to acquire the ability to see into the future through various ancient texts that he translated, and all these ancient texts actually directed him to Crown City 20 years prior to this movie. And as such, and the thing is, Crown City has a local fixture, specifically Celebi. Yeah, remember Celebi? Well, apparently it's not the random-ass... Apparently Celebi doesn't just hang around that random-ass forest we saw in the 4th movie. Apparently Celebi also likes to hang around Crown City. And thus, every once in a while, Celebi is just kind of flying around Crown City, doing its own thing, hanging out with the Pokemon, making the flowers bloom before eventually turning into berries. Basically, everyone likes Celebi. But the thing is, a side effect of Celebi's arrival in Crown City is that something appears called a time rift, which basically, it's supposed to be something that's able to collect time energy, which is supposed to feed directly back into Celebi when it next chooses to travel through time. And this is the source of Kodai's powers, as he was able to seek out where the time rift was the last time that Celebi came to Crown City, and then before Celebi even could re-enter the rift and make it vanish, he basically used his Pokemon to knock Celebi aside, and he basically hijacked the powers of the time rift himself, which in turn is what gave him his precognition, and thus he was able to use that to basically become the media mogul that he is today. However, unfortunately, when he took the power, well, it had an unfortunate side effect, as the energy wound up causing a feedback that wound up spreading all across Crown City, and as a result, all the plant life in Crown City died. And the thing is, that's a very big deal for Crown City, because part of what makes it such a big deal is that Crown City is like a mixture of nature and progress. As dotted throughout Crown City are various plants, trees, and so forth that basically make it look like the city was built around a forest instead of paving the way for a forest. So the city has its own kind of flair for natural beauty. But because of what Kodai did, the city basically just up and died. And it took a long time for the local denizens and the local Pokemon to work together to try and bring the city back to its prosperous state. However, nobody knew that Kodai did this. Nobody even knew he was in the city at the time. And as such, the mystery of why the plant life in Crown City died, mystery for why all the plant life in Crown City died was just that. A mystery for 20 years. Nobody knew why it happened. In the meantime, Kodai was able to use his psychic powers to, like I said, get ahead get ahead as a media mogul and basically just make himself one of the richest men in the world. But, well, that's where this movie comes in, because you see, his psychic powers are fading, slowly but surely. He's getting less, the visions of the future he has are becoming less and less frequent, and it's going to get to the point where he won't be able to see the future at all, and he's fully aware of this. So he is desperate to try and find a way to renew these powers, and well, he gets the answer to his problems as one day, as he's being introduced to his new secretary, a woman named Rowena, he has a vision involving Crown City, as he sees himself in Crown City just searching around, and the city itself is being attacked by the 3 legendary Pokemon. And among them, he sees a Pokemon that he doesn't recognize, a black Pokemon with red fur. This one. Zoroark. Of course, he has no idea how this all ties together, but he does realize it has something to do with the time rift because, well, in his vision, he sees the time rift. However, he can't really get a good, precise location on where it is, as the vision ends before he can really get into it. As such, this is what in turn leads Kodai into basically enacting his evil plan for the movie, because, well, he knows that there's going to be a time rift in Crown City, and since the time rift is what gave him his psychic powers before, well, exploiting it again should be able to renew them. As such, he begins kind of using the clues he saw in his vision to begin enacting his own evil plan. As well, he finds Zoroark as he goes to another Pokemon region, and he basically kidnaps Zoroark and takes it aboard his giant plane. But Zoroark is not the only Pokemon it takes. For you see, nestled in Zoroark's mane is another Pokemon, a Zoroa. Basically, it's the pre-evolved form of Zoroark, and it is just fucking adorable. I mean it. It's like a little wolf pup or coyote pup. I don't know. It's furry, it's fluffy, it's fluffy, and it clearly loves its Meemaw. It's adorable. And Zoroark clearly loves Zoroa just as much as Zoroa loves it, because the first time we ever see Zoroark is in Kodai's giant plane, and Zoroark's just sleeping, minding its own business as Zoroark climbs out of its mane and just starts nuzzling up to it. It's the cutest gosh darn thing. I love it. However, it's also that connection to Zoroark that gets Zoroark to play ball with Kodai. Because you see, Kodai can see the connection between these two, and he basically has his own Pokemon kidnapped to basically take Zoroark away, and he pretty much tells Zoroark, play ball or you're never seeing this little thing again. And while Zoroark clearly is pissed at the guy who kidnapped its child, and is now holding its child hostage, well, for the sake of that same child, it complies. However, we do see part of the reason why Zoroark is such an important part of Kodai's plans, because you see, the title of the movie doesn't lie. Zoroark has power over illusions. Basically, Zoroark has the ability to make itself look like any other Pokemon, and then basically be able to do attacks just as effectively as that Pokemon can do. But the thing is, while these attacks may look real, they're not. They're basically just illusions. They feel real when you're in them, but ultimately they're just fake. They're fake. And the thing is, Kodai's actually perfected a technology to be able to allow him to see through these illusions. Basically a bracelet that lights up that lights up and basically allows whoever wields it to just see right through the illusions and just be able to ignore them as easily as if walking through air. And so while Zoroark does attempt to try and threaten Kodai with its illusions, it doesn't really bother him. And it turns out that Kodai has his own set of illusions in place. Because you see, those 3 legendary Pokemon he apparently had, they're fakes too. Just created from his own little illusion technology. And the only reason that they have any mask, so to speak, is because they're made from these weird, I'm not gonna say cubes, but these floating black things that can basically be able to basically impersonate mass, so to speak. But either way, like I said, Zoroark has to play ball for the sake of Zorua. But the thing is, Zorua is kind of a little shyster. As while Zorua is being taken away, it manages to slip out of the grasp of the Pokemon that have it, and it basically just makes a run through Kodai's entire airship before it eventually makes its way to the outside and ends up falling off, only managing to save itself because, well, like Zoroark, Zorua also has the power of illusions, and thus it makes itself look like a floating Pokemon, which doesn't allow it to fly, but it does at least keep it from falling fast and allows it to just drift back down to the ground, which in turn also causes it to get in the place of Team Rocket, because Team Rocket's also going to Crown City. Yeah, they're in this movie too, and just like other movies, they really don't do anything in this film. They're just there. They're just there in the background, and they do nothing. They do nothing. In the meantime, though, Zorua does manage to land down into a nearby forest, but in turn it gets the attention of these, I guess, ape-like Pokemon? I don't know what they're called. Again, this is the era of Pokemon where I'm not really keeping track of Pokemon names, so I don't really know what they are. But it basically accidentally falls on them, and since, like I said, Zoro is a little shyster, it doesn't really seem regretful of messing with these Pokemon, and so they end up chasing it to a cliff. However, this is when Ash and Co. arrive back on the scene, because as the group was trying to make their way to Crown City, well, they got lost. Brock basically misread the directions, and so they just went one way over another. However, this in turn allows them to see Zoro as it's getting ambushed, and so Ash and Co. step in with their own Pokemon and pretty much just tell this wild group of Pokemon to pretty much knock it the fuck off and leave this little thing alone. As such, the group of wild Pokemon feel bad for ambushing Zorua and then leave, and so as Ash and Co. call back their Pokemon and make sure that Zorua is okay, it talks to them. Sort of. It's telepathy, like with other Pokemon movies. But yeah, Zorua can communicate. It's just that it doesn't really like to speak very often because its Mima, aka Zoroark, usually tells it not to talk to strangers. But at this point, the cat's out of the bag. As such, the group sees that Zoroa's in danger, and they basically want to know what the heck's going on, what's wrong with it. And so Zorua basically explains how it was separated from its Mima, and how he and its Mima were captured by a bad man and were taken away from their home, and the only reason it's here now is because it managed to escape. As such, the group feels sorry for Zorua, and while Zorua basically says that it wants to find its Mima. As such, Ash and Co., feeling sympathy for this adorable little thing, basically offer to help Zorua find Zoroark, which they don't know it's Zoroark, but obviously it is Zoroark. And so Zorua says, well, okay, fine then. I'll let you all be my friends. And we also see that Zorua and Zoroark can make themselves look like not just Pokemon, as we see Zorua actually take on the form of Ash. Although you can clearly tell that it is Zorua because he has the same shit-eating grin on his face, because he has that in all of his forms. He walks around like this, and when he turns around, his tail is still there. So clearly the impersonation is not a perfect one. And if they want to break the illusion, all they have to do is just pull on his tail, and he just goes right back to normal. Regardless, though, Zoroark tags along with the group as it basically takes on the form of Pikachu and then rides on Ash's head as the group makes their way to Crown City. Because, well, Zoroark says that's where its Meemaw is, and so they decide, and since, well, the group's heading there anyway, they take Zoroark with them. Speaking of which, going back to Crown City, this is where we see where Kodai's plan comes into play, as he releases Zoroark and commands it to take on the forms of Suicune, Entei, and Raikou. And sure enough, Zoroark does go into the city, and well, it just causes all the townspeople to just freak the hell out as it takes on the forms of these 3 legendary Pokemon. And so everybody freaks out and runs away as it causes various attacks throughout the city. Well, in the meantime, Kodai is basically following Zoroark as it basically marks its path of destruction across the city, and he intentionally has the cameras take footage of Zoroark doing its own thing, and then he edits it to make the damage look more severe, making it look like that certain structures were taken out and so forth. As such, after Kodai believes that Zoroark has done enough quote-unquote damage, he ends up using he basically uses his media power to immediately send out a news broadcast straight to Crown City, claiming that the evil Pokemon Zoroark has managed to set free Entei, Suicune, and Raikou, and is now taking control of them to terrorize Crown City, and that he apologizes because this is on his head, but he'll ensure that he catches this evil Pokemon and gets those legendaries back. But in the meantime, to make sure that nobody gets in his way, he asks that everyone evacuate the city and that the city itself be cut off so that nothing bad can happen. And well, the people eat it up hook, line, and sinker. As such, Crown City is evacuated, and well, basically the guy just gets what he wants. I just forgot his name for a second. Hold on 1 minute. Sorry, need to be reminded of his name, even though I just said it. But one is, yeah, Crown City's evacuated, and Kodai now has free reign of the place, which means that he no longer needs Zoroark. And he manages to even trick Zoroark into being captured again, as he sends out an illusion of Zoroark, which he was fully aware that Zoroark got away, but he kept Zoroark in line with a false image. And so when Zoroark sees what it thinks is its child, it runs to go reunite with it, only to end up getting thrown into another cage and being brought back to Kodai's ship, where it basically spends the rest of this movie just try to break the hell out of there because it basically wants to shove its claws up where the sun don't shine. In the meantime, though, Ash and Co end up arriving at the outskirts of Crown City, and they see that the entire place is basically cut off from the rest of the world. And of course, they want to know what the hell is going on. But when their local officer Jenny lets them know about Zoroark, and they even see the news broadcasts, well, Zoroark thinks it's a load of crap because obviously Zoroark's its mother, and Zoroark is not going to be Zoroark's obviously not that dangerous, and as such, Zoroark lets the group know that Kodai is the one that kidnapped them. So that must mean that Kodai is kind of full of crap, which is even further confirmed because as Zoroark is ranting about what Kodai's doing, a man comes up to the group who actually finds what they're talking about to be rather interesting. As such, the man introduces himself as Carl, and he claims that he's a reporter, and apparently he's been investigating Kodai for some time. And if what Zoroark is saying is true, then that must mean that there's something bigger going on. As such, to try and get to the bottom of this, Carl leads the Ash and Co away, as in turn as he brings them to what looks like an old mill or something, I don't know, but the old mill connects to these underground pathways, which in turn lead to older parts of Crown City. As such, the group basically sneaks into the city via these underground pathways, as Carl basically just gives the lowdown on who Kodai is as a person and his whole reputation of being able to see into the future to know his whole corporate spiel and all that. Speaking of which, as Kodai is getting ready to investigate the town, he basically he's kind of reveling in everything he's doing. But as this is happening, he convulses as he has a vision of the future. And in the vision of the future, he does see himself finding the time ripple, but in the process, he also has a vision of Ash and Co. And not only them, he also sees Carl and Rowena. Yeah, I'm going to spoil that with her as well. Rowena's a double agent. Like Carl, she's a reporter who was basically infiltrating Kodai's organization because she wants to get the dirt on him. And while she basically is playing ball right now and acting as the loyal subordinate, rest assured, she's just waiting for her opportunity to strike. It's just that, well, since she's Kodai's personal secretary, she's always around him, so she really has to keep up appearances, which means that she's not really getting a lot of chances to snoop into his affairs. In the meantime, though, this does make Kodai a bit more alert, because he knows that if these people are in his vision, then they're going to be a thorn in his side. Especially since part of his vision had Pikachu attacking him when he was getting so close to his end goal. So there you go. Regardless, though, Kodai basically takes advantage of this to try and make his way into Crown City as he begins trying to search for the Time Rift. And the thing is, part of what marks the appearance of the Time Rift is, like I said, Celebi. And yeah, something that I have neglected to mention is that Celebi has appeared in this movie. As at the beginning of the movie, we actually saw Celebi leave a Time Rift. And going back to how Crown City is supposed to be the epicenter of a Bakker Ball tournament, well, there are various clocks lined all around the city that are supposed to be counting down to the day of the tournament. And while Kodai's vision never gave him a precise location for where the Time Rift was going to be, he did see enough of the vision to know that the Time Rift is located near one of these clocks. However, as he begins surveying the town trying to find the rifts, well, it's a task easier said than done. As he goes from one clock to the next, and unfortunately he can't seem to find a Time Rift. In the meantime, Celebi is just kind of flying around the town doing its own thing, and what I love is that before Kodai got the entire city to evacuate, there are two citizens in the town who did see Celebi and rejoice. An older woman and an older man by the name of Tammy and Joe, with Joe actually being Carl's grandfather. That's revealed later. And they're just overjoyed to see Celebi, because apparently ever since the incident that happened 20 years prior, Celebi has not been back to the city. So them seeing Celebi return, they find is just a sign of good things to come. However, going back to Ash and Co, as the group and Carl manage to get into Crown City, they begin investigating and trying to find Zoroark, as Zoroark tries finding its mother's scent, so to speak, with Ash helping out by sniffing the ground too. He's the smartest of main characters, isn't he? But upon getting into the city, that's when the group sees the inconsistencies in Kodai's story, and that he really is full of crap, meaning that the legendary Pokemon they saw in the news broadcast weren't causing as much destruction as Kodai was making it out to be, and in turn Zoroark is able to confirm that those 3 legendary Pokemon were in fact its mother. So yeah, Kodai once again is full of crap, and they realize that. However, as Zoroark continues going through the city, Zoroark ends up kind of running ahead of the group, and in turn it ends up basically this entire time all of Kodai's news broadcasts have been broadcast from every television screen across the city, and as Zoroark sees this jackass of a man basically bad-mouthing its mother, it finally gets fed up and smashes one of the screens. But in the process, this gets the attention of 2 particular Pokemon, a Mightyena and, I'm not going to say a Tangela, but something, I think, basically an evolved form of that. Again, other people would know better than I do. I'm not, like I said, don't know every Pokemon. But basically, they put Zoroark to sleep, because the thing is, all the wild Pokemon in the city did see Zoroark when it arrived, and it announced its presence by first causing a major panic before it made itself look like another one of the legendary Pokemon. As such, considering that Zoroark looks so similar to Zoroark, all the wild Pokemon and local Pokemon basically think that Zoroark is bad news. However, as these 2 Pokemon end up putting Zoroark to sleep, that's when Ash and Co arrive, and in turn, that's when they cross paths with Joe and Tammy, with this being the moment when Carl reveals that Joe is his grandfather. As such, Joe and Tammy bring Ash and Co back to either Joe's place or Tammy's place. I don't know which. But basically, Ash and Co are able to trade notes with them as they learn about what happened. As Joe and Tammy reveal that the reason they didn't leave town is because, well, this is their home. They're not going anywhere. Plus, again, the appearance of Celebi does make them think that good tidings are ahead. However, as everyone is basically talking, Zoroark wakes up from its nap because, well, it senses that its mother is in danger, because going back to how Zoroark is trapped on Kodai's ship, it's basically just struggling and fighting to get out of its cage, because like I said, it wants to basically shove its claws straight up Kodai's ass, and it's worried about its child. And well, they basically imply throughout the movie that Zoroark and Zoroark do have a mother-son connection, or mother-daughter. I don't know what Zoroark's gender is. Basically mother-child connection. And well, Zoroark can sense that its mother is in in pain, and so when it gets up, it decides it needs to go find him. It needs to go find it, and so it just runs out of the shop with the group chasing after. However, in the midst of its running, it ends up going into a local park where, unfortunately, it's surrounded by a horde of wild Pokemon who, like I said, sees Zorua as just as much of an enemy as Zoroark, so they are not nice to it. Thankfully, that's when Pikachu and Piplup arrive on the scene, as Ash and Dawn sent them out to try and keep Zorua safe. And while the pair do try to vouch for Zorua, well, none of the wild Pokemon are listening. Like I said, they see Zorua as a threat because of well, like I said, it's the pre-evolution of Zoroark. Zoroark caused so much problems, ergo, they think Zorua was the enemy. However, before tensions rise and a full-on 3 versus I don't know how many Pokemon battle erupts, guess who should arrive on the scene but Celebi. Celebi basically is able to calm all the fighting down, as it basically flies throughout the trees and it just turns all the flowers into berries. And in turn it begins passing on the berries to everyone, including to Pikachu, Piplup, and Zorua. And in turn, as such, all tempers are basically cooled, as Celebi makes it clear that it wants to be everybody's friend, and Zorua happily takes the berry, and to show that it likes being friends, or that it likes Celebi, it ends up taking out the form of Celebi, which actually what I love, it causes Celebi to go, "Whoa!" But clearly Celebi thinks this is cool and even tries flying with Zorua, which doesn't work because while Zorua looks like Celebi, it can't actually fly since it's an illusion. But Zorua is basically happy to have Celebi as its friend, and basically asks if Celebi wants to help it find its mother. And Celebi, I guess, agrees, and thus Celebi, Zorua, Pikachu, and Piplup end up running out of the park, as Zorua once again tries to find Zoroark. In the meantime, that's when Ash and Co. plus Carl end up seeing all this going down, and while they do attempt to chase after the quartet of Pokemon, they don't really get very far, because you see, the thing is, while Kodai was searching for the clock with the time ripple near it, well, his cameras wound up finding Ash on them, and thus he realizes, that's the kid from my vision. I'm gonna want to deal with him, won't I? And as such, he basically ambushes the group as they try to go after the Pokemon, and basically locks them in their own cage before sending them back to his ship as well. Thankfully, though, this is where we get back to Rowena, because you see, when Kodai went out to the Crown City to go look for the Time Ripple, Rowena was left alone on his ship, so she basically took this opportunity to just go through all of his archives and just find whatever she could find about what he has buried away. And sure enough, that does allow her to find any and all records that she can about the incident that happened 20 years prior, which in turn allows her to basically put 2 and 2 together and realizes that Kodai was responsible for that event as well. However, before she can make use of this information, she ends up getting a call from one of Kodai's goons, who lets her know that they're there to drop off the prisoner. Sorry, I got tongue-tied there. Now, so Rowena puts on the show of a loyal minion to this guy to save face, but once the call ends, she basically just takes all the information she can, and then she goes down to the cargo hold where Ash and Co. and Carl are locked up, and basically sets them free, with all of them getting on their own little boat and just GTFOing right off of Kodai's ship. As such, the group runs into the town with Rowena explaining what happened, but ultimately thus the group realizes that since the group realizes that the event that happened 20 years ago is what gave Kodai his powers, then that's obviously why he's here in town now, because Rowena does confirm that his powers are fading, and obviously he must be here in Crown City again to try and renew them. And well, since 20 years prior, messing with a time ripple caused all of plant life in the city to die, well, if he messes with it again, history is going to repeat itself. And considering that it took so long to get everything back to normal before, yeah, you can tell it's going to be another big process. And if this is the case with and if this is going to be how it is with Kodai, then he's not going to stop. He is like I said, he's a ruthless man, and what's going to happen the next time his powers start failing? So yeah, he needs to be stopped ASAP. However, Kodai's search, well, it's not bearing any fruit. You see, for he's basically checked every clock that's marked in town, and none of them have the time ripple, and he's beginning to get impatient, because in his vision he saw the time ripple by a clock, so where the hell could it be? While he doesn't get an answer to that question, well, he does get another vision. Only in this case, he has a vision of himself choking out Celebi. And while he does so, he seems to get another vision of the future. And as such, when this vision passes, basically Kodai realizes, oh, I just need Celebi, and so he makes it his priority to try and find the legendary time-traveling Pokemon. In the meantime, Celebi, Zoroark, Pikachu, and Piplup have actually made their way to the edge of the city and basically climbed this giant tree, and, well, unfortunately, despite Zoroark's best efforts, it has not found Zoroark, and it's beginning to get downtrodden because of it. Thankfully, Celebi is there to try and comfort Zoroark, as Zoroark finds this little alcove in the tree to sleep in, and basically Celebi used its powers to basically make this little alcove bloom with all these plants that Zoroark thinks feel soft and nice, and basically reminded of its mother's mane. It's actually pretty damn sweet, and it even cries as it recalls the last time it was slept in its mother's mane. It's just gosh darn adorable. However, while they obviously spend a good chunk of time there, unfortunately as day turns to night, well, that's when Kodai manages to find the quartet of Pokemon and basically makes it clear that it wants Celebi. Of course, Zoroark, Pikachu, and Piplup are not going to let the crazy guy who let an entire city die 20 years prior get his hands on the time-traveling Pokemon. But unfortunately, Kodai's own Pokemon managed to basically stop these three before they can actually do anything to stop him. As such, he manages to get to Celebi, and sure enough, just like in his vision, he begins choking Celebi out. And sure enough, this does seem to have an effect on him as he begins having more precise visions about where the time ripple is. But he's not getting anything precise, so he basically just chokes this thing harder. But thankfully, before he can actually kill the adorable green time-traveling Pokemon, that's when help arrives on the scene. As Ash and Co. manage to arrive on the... As Zoroark manages to get a second wind and basically jumps at Kodai and basically just clings to his face, which in turn causes him to basically go nuts. As throughout this entire time, he's been riding on what looks like a little hovercraft, and as Zoroark just basically as Kodai struggles to get Zoroark off of him, the hovercraft basically falls to the ground. He has to jump and retreat from it, which in turn does cause him to lose his grip on Celebi, but in turn he does end up chucking Zoroark right into the tree. As such, he immediately tries going after Celebi again, but thankfully, like I said, that's when help arrives on the scene as Pikachu and Piplup manage to find their own second wins and scare him off, and thankfully that's when Ash and Co. arrive on the scene and basically tell Kodai to go pound sand. With this being the moment where Rowena has to admit, yeah, I betrayed you, which I kind of love the idea of this guy being an utter asshole, but possibly just being a good boss. I don't know. I just kind of find that amusing. I don't know. She makes a quip about him not having to worry about her last paycheck. I don't care. I'm getting off topic. Point is, the group does manage to distract Kodai long enough as they manage to disarm a lot of his flying Pokemon and even take out a good chunk of his cameras. And so in the distraction, the group is able to get Zoroark and Celebi away as they end up running into their own boat manage to run into their own boat that's on a nearby river and just flee. However, Kodai actually does stop his hired goon from going after them because, like I said, he did have a vision of Rowena betraying him, so he prepared for this. He pulls out what looks like a pen, but in reality is a spy drone, and sends it off to basically just follow the group. As the group does eventually manage to make their way to a workshop that apparently belongs to Joe, as they all try to recuperate. Unfortunately, Celebi is not doing so well after it nearly got choked out by the bad guy, and so while the group is able to heal it up so that it can at least be on the mend, unfortunately, it's not doing so well. It can't fly anymore and basically needs to be tended to for a while. As such, the group realizes that if they want to help Celebi, then they need to find the time ripple. Since the time ripple is connected to Celebi, and the whole reason why it tends to stick around isn't just because it's a side effect of Celebi time traveling, but the time ripple is supposed to collect time energy, which is supposed to go into Celebi whenever it's done time traveling. Hence why when Kodai messes with it, it causes the feedback, as he basically takes that energy for himself. However, the problem still arises that the thing is, well, nobody knows where the time ripple is. Like I said, Kodai searched all the clocks in town and he couldn't find it. And as such, as Rowena ends up bringing up a map showcasing where all the clocks in town are, well, nothing really. She can't find anything. That is till Joe looks at the map and says that he knows of a clock that's not listed on there. You see, in the arena where the Bakker Ball tournament is the original prototype clock. He set it up there when he was getting all the other clocks brought into town. And so, since this was the beginning, and since this was the first clock, he set it there as like to commemorate everything. And thus, odds are, if the time ripple isn't in any of the other clocks, that's where that clock is their best bet. Unfortunately, though, Kodai is now made aware of this, as his spy drone ends up overhearing it, and thus Kodai and his goon basically decide they need to make a beeline right for the arena. Thankfully, though, Pikachu catches wind of the spy drone and ends up shocking it, but which does stop Kodai from listening in on them any further. But it also lets the group know that Kodai knows where the time ripple is, so they need to beat him to the punch, causing everyone to just bolt out. Unfortunately, though, Carl points out one big problem. If Kodai has the power to see into the future, then he's going to be hard to beat. So if they want to beat him, they need to trick his future vision. As such, the group basically sets a plan in motion, and this plan requires that everybody splits up, with Ash, Dawn, and Brock going off on their own to try and make a beat through the underground caverns to try and get to the arena, while Carl, Rowena, Joe, and Tammy have to basically go off to do something else, and that something else actually involves Zoroark, because you see, when Zoroark was being hurt by Kodai earlier, Zoroark could sense it and basically fought harder to get out of its cage, and while the cage is set up so that it will actively harm anything that tries to get out of it, well, Zoroark pretty much went fuck that and kept going, and to the point where it eventually did manage to break out of its cage and then just trashed Kodai's ship in its attempt to get out and be reunited with its child. And it did manage to get out of the plane. Before it could go into Crown City, it unfortunately met with some disturbances. You see, going back to when Zoroark attacked Crown City, well, it turns out that attack got the attention of a few familiar faces. Specifically, the real Entei, Suicune, and Raikou. Or at least their shiny variants. Yeah, this is another example of where I think the Pokemon films tend to just consider continuity a suggestion rather than an all-around rule. Because, well, despite the fact that we have at least met one of these legendary Pokemon in previous movies, they don't look the same. Like, I'm willing to give a pass to Raikou and Entei because I have not seen Raikou at any of these Pokemon movies, and the most he's appeared in the anime was in like specials here and there. And Entei, and likewise, the last time we saw Entei in full was in Pokemon 3: Spell of the Unknown, and that wasn't even the real Entei. That was a dream creation made by the Unknown. So I'm willing to at least let it slide that the dream Entei and the fake and the real Entei would have some things that were different. With that said, Suicune is where I draw the line, because we have seen Suicune before in Celebi, the voice of the forest, and this one, and the Suicune we see here does look different. Now before you say, well, obviously they're just not the same Suicune, wasn't the whole point of legendary Pokemon, or at least part of the point with them, was that there was only one of them? And yet, for whatever reason, the anime films tend to act like there's more than one of these legendary Pokemon, which does not make sense to me. And again, like I said, I brought this up, I wanted to bring this up when I talked about Lucario and the Mystery of Mew, but the thing is, it's never really addressed. They never really seem to point it out. Hell, let's go back to Celebi for a minute. Despite the fact that Ash should know Celebi, as he has met Celebi before in a previous movie, well, he never acknowledges that in this movie. In fact, there are a couple points in this movie that seem to imply that he has no idea who this Celebi is. That he's never met Celebi before now. That he recognizes Celebi because it's a legendary Pokemon, but for whatever reason he treats this as though this is the first time they've met, even though they met in a previous movie. It doesn't make sense to me, and it's a little nitpick I have with the anime movies, that despite the fact that they are connected to the anime, they treat the connections they have with each other like they're suggestions. Like the continuity between movies is just optional. And I'm sorry, I find that annoying. I understand that the films, I understand continuity-wise, the films would have a harder time to be placed somewhere in the anime timeline, but you'd think they'd have at least a little continuity between each other. It's part of the reason why I liked The Rise of Dark, why I liked the connections with The Rise of Darkrai, Giratina and the Sky Warrior, and Arceus and the Jewel of Life, because those films did have an interlocking continuity. What happened in one movie led into another, and that in turn led into another, and you learned that all the films were connected by a series of events that even we weren't aware of, and I appreciated that. So I just find it annoying that other films basically look at what happened in previous movies and go, we don't really count that. It's just, I don't know, it's dumb. It's something that gets on my nerves, and it's gonna happen again. Trust me, it will happen again. Like I said, there is another movie that seems to disregard continuity, and we will talk about that in the next few weeks, so expect me to once more expect me to rant about it once more. But getting sidetracked. So why are the shiny legendaries here? Well, again, like I said, they already could sense that there was danger going on in Crown City, especially since Zoroark was impersonating them. But the thing is, another reason why they're here is because there's apparently some ancient legend or whatever that says that whenever Crown City is in danger, these 3 legendary Pokemon will come and protect it. It's mentioned once, so to justify their appearance here. The point is, they realized Crown City was in danger, and so they're here to basically deal with the danger. Only problem is, they think that danger is Zoroark, and so once they arrive on the scene and see Zoroark emerging from Kodai's ship, they basically all unleash their attacks right on Zoroark. Although it does take out Kodai's ship, so hey, they did something right there. But the point is, as Zoroark basically makes its way into the city to try and find Zorua, well, these 3 legendaries are just hot on its tail and are just refusing to give it any leeway and breathing room, to the point where they do manage to get Zoroark cornered, and the only reason that Zoroark manages to stop them from attacking it outright is that it uses its illusion powers to basically make them all think they're trapped in crystal. Thankfully, that's when Carl, Rowena, Tammy, and Joe arrive on the scene, and Rowena is able to use the anti-illusion bracelet that she got from Kodai to dispel the illusion and basically reveal that what Zoroark has done is just nothing but a bunch of hooey. As such, they're able to do a flashbang in which it does disorient Zoroark and dispels the illusion. Before anybody else can attack anybody else, well, basically Joe and Tammy's Pokemon come out and basically stand between Zoroark and the legendary Pokemon. And as such, all the wild Pokemon come out because, well, thanks to their meeting with Zorua and Celebi, they have learned that Zoroark is not the bad guy here, I guess, and thus they're basically able to tell the legendary Pokemon, this thing isn't your enemy, it's just as much a victim as everybody else here. Thus basically once more tensions are cooled, and Zoroark does realize that, hey, it's got friends. In the meantime, though, back with Ash and Co., the trio is trying to make their way to the arena, and unfortunately they end up getting cut off by Kodai, which in turn results in Brock and Dawn standing back to deal with one of Kodai's goons, while Ash takes Celebi right to the time ripple. As such, it becomes a race as Kodai basically takes his, I guess, Jeep slash boat to chase after them, as it is able to drive through the river, and Ash manages to run through, but Ash does manage to get to the arena first, and he basically lets Celebi go so that it can try and fly out to the time ripple, which in turn causes Kodai to send his Pokemon after Celebi to try and stop it, which he does manage to intercept Celebi and knock it down, only to reveal that it ain't Celebi. It was Zorua, and the reason it could fly is because Carl had a Bronzong as his Pokemon, and it basically used one of its abilities to make Celebi levitate. So yeah, that was able to trick Kodai, but Kodai basically sees this as a golden opportunity as he basically takes Zorua. And in the meantime, which actually brings me back to the other trainers, as Dawn and Brock do their best to try and fight against Kodai's goon, and while he does still have numbers on his side with his Pokemon, well, things eventually go south fast as Zoroark arrives on the scene and manages to get rid of all his Pokemon and even send him falling on his ass. However, Zoroark ends up leaving the battle when it senses that Zorua was in danger, and so it basically runs to the arena to try and help its kid. In the meantime, though, Ash actually had the real Celebi hidden in his backpack, and so he tries to bring Celebi right to the time ripple as they're able to zero in on where it is. But that's when Kodai once more arrives on the scene, and he's able to hold Ash and Co. in place using his Mismagius and its psychic abilities. As such, Kodai once more thinks that he's basically got it, that everything he wants is right there in the palm of his hand, and while Zoroark does manage to arrive on the scene and wants to basically rip Kodai a new one, he basically holds up Zorua and basically says, anything happens to me, your kid gets it. and as such, to make sure Zoroark does not do anything, he basically has his Pokemon attack Zoroark and basically just go over the top, and has it basically just has Zoroark just thrown into a tree and disoriented and weak. As such, with almost nothing to stop him, well, Kodai goes up to the Time Ripple and basically just tosses Zoroark aside as he decides to let history repeat itself, as he once more, as on his wrist he has this little hook shot or whatever, and thus he does end up shooting into the Time Rift, and he does manage to use it to try and once more it looks like he absorbs the energy, and once more it seems like the energy feedback once more sends out another wave that begins causing all the plant life in Crown City to start dying. As such, Ash basically calls out to Kodai saying, "You're just gonna let everything die? You don't care about anyone?" And Kodai reveals that no, he doesn't give a shit about anybody. This is all about him, baby. He admits that he's the one that caused the city's all plant life to die 20 years ago. But he's the only one that knows that. As far as nobody knows that he was there. And as far as anybody's aware right now, he's in the city trying to deal with the evil Zoroark. So he thinks he's in the clear, that no one will ever learn what happened here today, and that he once more is king of everything. Only for the death waves I'm going to call it, to suddenly freeze up and then reverse. Why? It was an illusion. It was all an illusion created by Zoroark. In reality, Kodai was nowhere near the Time Ripple. And I'm willing to actually buy that he thought he was, because as we've showcased, those Zoroark's illusions are so powerful that they can feel real unless you have a means of counteracting them. And the thing is, well, as for how Kodai was able to be fooled by this one, well, you see, when Kodai actually captured Zoroark before, Zoroark wound up jumping at him and tried biting into his arm. Now, Kodai did not think too much of it, as he just knocked Zoroark aside and then captured it. But the thing is, the arm that Zoroark bit, it was the arm that he had his anti-illusion band on. And so when Zoroark bit into it, it broke the wristband. Meaning that now Kodai is just as susceptible to Zoroark's illusions as anybody else. And, well, when he just made his big grand confession, guess who was hiding in the bushes but Carl and Rowena, who were filming the confession on a camera. Meaning they now have proof that Kodai was the guy that ruined the city all those years prior, and that this whole operation now was nothing but a load of crap. As such, Kodai's a little pissed about this, that he was basically tricked into admitting his whole plan, and that he was so close to getting his ultimate power, only to find that it was still a few yards that way. As such, Zoroark basically tries running to its mother, and because Kodai's a jackass, he orders one of its Pokemon to try and hit Zoroark with a Shadow Ball, which results in Zoroark jumping in its way and taking the hit for Zoroark. And yeah, there was a very big hit as Zoroark just goes down. As such, trying to add an extra fuck you, he once more shoots out his grappling hook at Zoroark and intends to just kind of basically shock it as payback for tricking it. But Zoroark basically powers through the pain and then just sends a wave right at him, which in turn shatters the grapple thing on his wrist, which basically sends him back. So he's now basically powerless. And the arrival of other Pokemon on the scene ends up freeing Ash and Pikachu from Miss Magius, and in turn Ash and Co are able to take care of Kodai's Pokemon. As such, he basically Kodai decides, fuck this, I'm gonna try and make one last grab for power, as he runs at the Time Ripple. Before he can even get close to it, who should intercept him but the three real legendary Pokemon, who basically just give him the rough equivalent of, oh no you don't. As such, realizing he's outnumbered, Kodai just runs further into the arena and basically tries getting as far in as he can, but Zoroark is one final screw you, ends up using its illusion powers, and as he runs into the arena, he for a brief second thinks he's flying atop his own plane, but this in turn causes him to lose his ground and he ends up tripping and falling into the arena and falling unconscious. Unfortunately, though, this illusion took what was left of Zoroark's strength, as after all the attacks it sustained, it's not doing so well. It is weak, and it is very clearly near death. And so Zoroark basically passes out in front of everybody, and it's not getting back up. And while Zoroark basically pleads with its Meemaw to wake up, even saying that I got stronger for you, Meemaw, watch, as it creates an illusion of a field around them that looks like their old home, Zoroark isn't reacting. It's clear that Zoroark is fading fast, and there's nothing anyone can do to stop it. Well, almost anybody. Because you see, the time ripple is still right there, and, well, Celebi still needs its pick-me-up. And as such, Ash basically brings Celebi right to the time ripple and tells it to just go right in right now. As such, Celebi is able to get into the time ripple, and, well, sure enough, the energy from the ripple is able to heal Celebi, and in turn empowers it. And thus, with that power, well, it basically does what all the other Celebis did in Pokemon Forever, and it distributes that power right to Zoroark, which in turn is able to revive it. So, yeah, it's a similar bullshit thing here, but at least they didn't try hammering it in, so I'm willing to accept it. And it's a heartfelt reunion between mother and child. I'm willing to give. I do not care. That makes me smile. Damn it. But yeah, Zoroark is revived, and thus it and Zoroark basically just embrace each other in a hug, and it's the sweetest gosh darn thing I've seen, and I love it. But then there's the matter of the bad guy. For you see, while Celebi bids everyone farewell and eventually just disappears as it travels to some other time and place, well, as night turns to day, well, it turns out that Ash and Co. were able to call the police, and they do have proof about Kodai admitting about all of his wrongdoings. And so, as Kodai wakes up in the arena, he's woken up to the sound of himself admitting to everything he's done. And, well, Officer Jenny is basically there when he wakes up and tells him, "You can tell me more about that when you're down at the precinct." So, yeah, we all know this is fiction because the rich guy got punished for his crimes. But, yeah, with all that said and done, basically, it's basically just time to wrap everything up. As the 3 legendary Pokemon basically go off as the danger has passed, so they basically decide that Crown City doesn't need them anymore. And as for Zoroark and Zoroark, they basically give everyone a fond farewell because, well, they were taken out of their natural habitat, so they gotta go home. And as such, the last we see of them is them being put on a ship as Carl and Rowena basically accompany the pair back home, with the pair basically with Zoroark and Zoroark taking on the forms of Pikachu and Ash as a final farewell. And what I love is that it's Zoroark who takes on the form of Ash, while Zoroark takes on the form of Pikachu. The big one's the little one, little one's the big one. It's funny. But ultimately, it's a fond farewell as everyone says they'll be happy to see each other again. Ash promises they'll see Zoroark and Zoroark again. Spoilers, they don't. But the film ends with everybody happy that they met each other, and well, that's all she wrote. From there, we get our credit scenes as we see that Kodai is now being arrested, and his name is basically being plastered all over the news and newspapers and about everything that he's done. We see Ash and Co. as they're watching the Bocker Ball game and just getting into it. It's nice. It's got some nice stuff. We end up getting little flashes of all the trainers of the Sinnoh region. We see Paul going through the ruins of Dialga and Palkia at one point. Which, if you don't know, Paul was the rival trainer in Diamond and Pearl, and he was just a complete asshole. But he did have a character development arc there, so good on him. We see and of course we see Zoroark and Zoroark return back to their home as they're happy. And just like I mentioned, Team Rocket was also in this movie. Throughout the entire film, they were trying to get their hands on legendaries. It didn't go well, and eventually they got swept away in a tide. And the last we see of them is them flowing down a stream on a boat before we eventually see them once more stalking Ash and Co. in a giant Meowth balloon. Because again, they have no lives. So yeah, that was Zoroark, Master of Illusions, and my thoughts on it. I just think it's a cute movie. It's not that, like, this thing is not like a grand epic or anything like that. There's nothing truly deep and mystifying or something going on there. But for what it is, I think it's just a pretty damn good movie. Again, for me, the real strength of the movie is basically. It's in Zoroark and Zoroark. That, I think, is the glue that holds the movie together, in my opinion. The rest of the film, don't get me wrong, the rest of the film is fine, and is fine. as I do kind of like the tension that rises from having to try and beat Kodai to the time ripple. I like seeing Celebi doing cute shit, and I do kind of like the added mystery and tension that rises from the frame-up story. But the thing is, the real meat and potatoes of that makes the movie worth watching, in my opinion, is Zoroark and Zoroark, plus Kodai, but we'll get to him in a minute. But the thing is, the thing that makes me really interested in seeing where the story go is that Zoroark and Zoroark genuinely do feel like a true mother and child. Despite the fact that only one of these two can talk, quote-unquote, I really do feel the connection that these two have with each other. Zoroark actually feels like a mother that is doing all these heinous things, not because it's an evil being, but because it basically needs to comply with this psychotic jackass because it wants to protect the one thing in its life that it cares most about, i.e. Zoroark. And in turn, it makes you feel sorry for Zoroark because in everything action that it takes in this movie, you can feel the raw, primal rage that Zoroark has whenever it knows Zoroark is in danger, and it in turn makes you feel sorry for Zoroark because all you want is for this creature to get back with its kid, and every time it snarls at Kodai and basically just wants to rip his head off, you're there with it because ultimately you want to see Zoroark reunite with Zoroark, and by the end as the film goes along and you see Zoroark just fighting so desperately to be reunited with its kid, it's the sweetest thing. And the more obstacles that go in Zoroark's way, the more you really root for this Pokemon. You want to see it be reunited with Zoroark, and so to see misunderstanding after misunderstanding as people continue attacking it and think that it's the true mastermind behind everything that's happening, it feels very sad. And by the end, when it's eventually revealed that Zoroark is actually a victim, and everyone realizes, oh, so the rich asshole is the one behind all this, it actually makes everything feel more triumphant, especially when Zoroark is able to actually trick Kodai into basically revealing his hand as it uses its illusion powers to pretty much get him to confess to all the crimes he's committed, just because at this point he thinks, I'm one! I can do whatever I want! All of you suck! I'm the best! And which in turn is what basically is the final nail in his coffin. And what I love is that even as Kodai basically throws everything in the kitchen sink at Zoroark as a final screw you to it, well, it still gets the last laugh, because even when it quote-unquote kicks the bucket, it basically just makes him suffer and makes him regret ever messing with it and its kid. And I like that. I like that. It's just a nice bit of karma that really does work. And like I said, seeing Zoroark reunite with Zoroark is the sweetest thing, and its revival is actually really nice, so I dig that. Speaking of which, I like Zoroark as a character. In a way, Zoroark kind of reminds me of Shaman from Giratina and the Sky Warrior. This cute little adorable Pokemon that has a little attitude, as Zoroark clearly gets a kick out of messing with people by shapeshifting into them and so forth, and that in turn does remind me a little bit of Shaman, as Shaman was cute and adorable, and then like to milk it for all of its worth, just because, well, it feels like it's the gratitude Pokemon, you should do it at once. But the difference between Shaman and Zoroark, in my opinion, is that Zoroark never feels like it milks its cuteness. Zoroark is just like a kid. It acts like a kid. It talks like a kid. It just is a kid. And yeah, it likes to be mischievous and a little snide at times, but it never means anyone any harm. It's just, even when it does directly antagonize other Pokemon or people, it's not doing it out of malice, and in some cases, it's not even doing it intentionally. It's just that it's in the wrong time and place, and as a kid, it doesn't really have a full situational awareness of how severe certain circumstances are, unless it directly involves it and its mother. Like with Kodai, as when it sees Kodai basically spreading lies about Zoroark being this evil Pokemon, it's like, oh, you are full of shit, my man. I know what you've done, and I'm going to make you pay for that. So, but the thing is, in every other situation, Zoroark is just like a kid. He's curious, he's excitable, but ultimately, at the end of the day, he just wants to be with his mama. And that's again part of the glue that works for him, because he's not a very complex character, but he doesn't need to be. Like I said, Zoroark is just a kid, and you do feel the emotion when he just is desperately calling out for his mom, just tries finding her wherever he can. And every time he hits a dead end, you feel how much it hurts. Again, the scene where he, Celebi, Pikachu, and Piplup are at that big tree, and he basically laments not being able to see his mom. It's just some sad stuff. And when Celebi tries comforting it by creating a little grove of leaves for it to just rest in, it's a sweet scene as it reminds Zorua of nestling in its mother's fur, and when it falls asleep with tears in its eyes, it just tugs at your heartstrings, and it makes me feel so sad for this thing. It puts on a strong front, and in some cases it even acts defiant towards any Pokemon that challenges it. But at the end of the day, it's just a scared child wanting its mom back, and that's what makes it. And that's, I think, what makes it work. And likewise, it's what makes the final reunion with Zoroark at the end of the movie hit that much harder, because it does feel joyous to see mother and child reunited. And it almost didn't happen because Zoroark basically did everything in its power to protect Zorua from Kodai and his jackassery. But by the end, it does actually feel like but in the end, it does, when they are finally reunited, it feels earned, and it makes you smile. It's genuinely nice, cute stuff that I just can't get enough of. And speaking of Kodai, I liked him. I liked him as a villain. Now, I'll be first to admit, Kodai's not a complex villain. This guy is very much a 2D cookie-cutter Saturday morning jackass, as his entire motivation for doing what he's doing in this movie is just because he wants to stay rich. The only reason he's rich at all is because he took the power of the Time Ripple and fucked over Crown City. And he has every intent on doing that again in this movie. He does not care who he hurts. He doesn't care who he has to lie to. He doesn't care how much panic he has to cause, as long as he gets all the cool powers as long as he gets the cool psychic powers that allow him to be able to basically beat Wall Street. He does not give a shit. He wants to be the big head honcho. He wants to be on top, and he doesn't care about how many little people he has to step on to do that. And in my opinion, that's what kind of makes for a good villain. Because sometimes you don't really need a complex villain to make him entertaining. And sometimes you just need to have a 2D jackass that you love to hate. And this guy, I love to hate. Because they pretty much just ham it up whenever he's on screen. He's so full of himself that it's actually kind of funny. And quite frankly, he's an animal abuser. I want to see this guy get his comeuppance. That's what I think another thing that makes it work. Because they show him as so irredeemable that when he actually starts losing in this movie, it is so very satisfying to see to see his ultimate undoing basically being him just gloating about how awesome he is, and about how he basically did all these terrible things in the past, but no one will ever be able to tie it back to him is kind of glorious. And to have it, and when he is finally taken in by the police and that recording is thrown in his face, you can just see the abject anger in his eyes, in his expression, as he just goes, no, this is not how it's supposed to go. I should have won. I saw myself winning. Why didn't I win? I love that. It's great. I like that. It's again, he's not a complex villain by any means, but he's entertaining and definitely a guy that you love to hate, as he's an irredeemable jackass who, by the end, when he does get his comeuppance, is so satisfying. And sometimes that's all you really need. You just need a villain that you really want to see lose, and this guy was a guy that you were overjoyed to see lose in the best way possible. So, again, give you credit for that one. As for the rest of the movie, admittedly, I think the rest of the film is just kind of standard Pokemon fare for these films. You got a big grand threat going on with Kodai trying to find the Time Ripple, and ultimately you do have the stuff with the other legendary Pokemon, and I admit that's kind of cool to see them. They don't really play a large part in the movie, so I don't really give that much of a shit about them. The side characters are fine enough, but there's nothing really too in-depth about them. I won't say they're unnecessary characters by any means, but they are basically just your standard side characters. They appear in the movie, they help out Ash and Co when necessary, and likewise by the end of the film, while they don't take anything away from their presence, they also don't feel like they added a lot either. So again, they do their jobs, they do them well, they're not bad characters, but at the same time, I don't think a lot was really indulged with them. Though not in the same sense as Rise of Darkrai, because at least those characters felt more complete, but that's another movie entirely. Point is, they weren't bad, just could have been stronger. Likewise, I can't really think of likewise, So, likewise, a similar thing could be done with Celebi here, because quite frankly, I don't think a lot was done differently with Celebi in this movie that wasn't done in Celebi, the Voice of the Forest. As Celebi, like I said, Celebi in this film really is just Celebi. He goes around being cute, friendly to other Pokemon, he gets in danger when someone wants his power, and then by the end, he basically pulls the same Deus Ex Machina that he did in the last movie he appeared in, and except in this case, it's not saving him, instead of saving itself, it saves another Pokemon, so what can you do? So, I don't know, I can't really think of a lot else with this movie, and I think that's another reason why I just find it to be a pretty good or just pretty cute movie. Because when it comes down to it, the real meat and potatoes that keeps this movie together is the relationship with Zoroark and Zoroark and the villain. And for both of those, I think are really good, because for Zoro and Zoroark, you do genuinely want to see them come back together. And seeing all the trials and tribulations that these two Pokemon have to endure just to be able to reunite by the end is harrowing. As you do feel sorry for them, you do want to see them get back together, and you see everybody pretty much gang up on them because of what Kodai has done, and you do really feel bad. You do feel bad for them, but by the end, when they do manage to reunite, it does feel really good. And likewise, the same trials and tribulations that they go through also, in turn, is what strengthens the villain. Because like I said, Kodai in almost every one of his scenes is just a jackass. There is nothing about him that makes him redeeming, but at the same time, he's kind of fun to see in his hamminess. And then likewise, the villainous traits he's such an unredeemable jackass that you really do find satisfaction in seeing him get his ass beat by the end of the film. So, while I really do wish that I had more to talk about with this movie, because I really do wish I did have more to talk about, and but ultimately, I think the glue that keeps this movie good, in my opinion, is the stuff with Zoroark and Zoroark and our villain. The rest of the film, in my opinion, is not bad. It's just kind of standard fare at this point. Nothing too grand. It gets the job done, but the real meat and potatoes is just Zoroark and Zoroark, and seeing them by the end be reunited. It's great. It's sweet. It's nice. It's packed with plenty of emotions. You really do feel for them throughout this entire flick, and by the end, when they are reunited and Kodai gets exactly gets exactly what he deserves, it does feel emotionally satisfying, and I am glad to see them both head off back to their home region, while Kodai basically gets sent to the Hooskow. So, yeah, again, I really do wish that there was more that I could talk about with it when it comes to what I liked and disliked about this movie. Again, flaws, I guess, would be that the plot does feel like standard Pokemon fare, but ultimately, if you just want to see a cute little story about a mother and child wanting to try, basically overcoming a bunch of trials, wanting to get back together, and you want to see an animal abuser get exactly what he deserves, I recommend this movie. It's good. Like I said, it's cute. It's fun. Got plenty of good action. Has a lot of heart that really knows how to pull you in. And overall, I just think it's a cute time that I would happily watch again. So, yeah, that's really all I have to say. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Samuel Johnson, and while this is the end of the Diamond and Pearl era, next week we'll be welcoming in the Black and White era of the anime films, as we start off with not one, but 2 movies, as next week we will be taking a look at Pokemon Black, Victini and Reshiram, and Pokemon White, Victini and Zekrom.